Story 1. The Predator's Lies. It started innocently enough. I was 15 years old, navigating the awkward teenage years, and dating a girl who lived in a neighboring town. Visiting her meant long rides on the train and late night walks through unfamiliar streets. But I didn't mind. It felt like an adventure. One night, after a small argument with her mother cut my visit short, I found myself walking home alone at 2 a.m. The town was quiet, the streets dimly lit, and the cold November air bit at my skin. I was about halfway home when a man offered me a ride. His car pulled up alongside me, the passenger window rolling down to reveal a friendly face. He was in his mid-50s, slightly overweight, with messy grey hair that framed a warm smile. "It's freezing out here," he said. "Hop in, I'll give you a ride." It seemed harmless, generous, even, but hindsight has a way of sharpening the details. At first, the ride seemed normal. He asked me where I was headed, and I gave him vague directions, hoping to avoid giving away my exact address. The heat in the car was a welcome relief from the biting cold. And for a moment, I felt at ease. Then his questions turned personal. "You have a girlfriend?" he asked casually, his eyes glancing at me through the rearview mirror. "Yeah," I replied, keeping my answers short. "She ever come over to your place? Or is it all at hers?" The question caught me off guard, and I hesitated. He chuckled, as if sensing my discomfort. "Relax," he said. "I'm just curious. I've got a buddy, 14 years old, same age as you. He comes over all the time. We play pool, drink a little. It's good fun. You should come by sometime." Something about the way he said it made my skin crawl. His tone was casual, but there was an underlying eagerness that felt wrong. As we neared my neighborhood, I asked him to drop me off a block away from my house. He nodded, pulling to a stop. "Give me your number," he said, smiling as he handed me his phone. "In case you ever need another ride. Or if you want to play pool." I hesitated but didn't want to seem rude. So, I gave him my number, climbed out of the car, and quickly walked home, relieved to be out of his presence. The next morning, the messages started. At first, they were harmless. A simple good morning or hope you're having a good day. I replied a couple of times out of politeness. But soon, his texts became more frequent and intrusive. "Come over sometime," he wrote. "We'll have fun." When I didn't respond, he called, repeatedly. If I ignored him, he'd leave voicemails, his tone growing more insistent with each one. "I've got the pool table set up for you," he said in one. "Come on, don't be shy." My unease grew with each message. Something about his persistence felt less like friendliness and more like obsession. It wasn't long before his behavior escalated. He started showing up near my house, parked on the street where I walked my dog. I noticed his car multiple times, always idling, his face obscured by the tinted windows. Once, I caught him taking photos. I'd been playing with my dog in a nearby field when I saw the flash of his camera. My stomach churned as I realized he wasn't just passing by, he was watching me. I began changing my routines, walking my dog at different times and taking alternate routes. But somehow, he always seemed to find me. The turning point came when my mother found out. She'd noticed the constant calls and texts on my phone and demanded to know who they were from. Reluctantly, I told her about the man, omitting some of the more unsettling details to avoid worrying her. My mother didn't hesitate. She grabbed my phone, called the man, and confronted him directly. "If you contact my son again," she said, her voice cold and unwavering, "I will call the police. Do you understand?" The calls and texts stopped immediately. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, but the relief was short-lived. Several weeks later, I was walking my dog when I saw his car again, parked on the same street. This time, the headlights were off, and the engine was silent. He didn't get out or call out to me. He just sat there, watching. I hurried home, my heart racing, and told my mother. She contacted the police, but without a direct threat or evidence of harassment. There was little they could do. Eventually, the sightings stopped, and life returned to normal, or as normal as it could be after an experience like that. But just when I thought he was gone for good, he resurfaced in the most chilling way possible. Years later, after I'd almost forgotten about him, I found an old phone while cleaning out my room. Curious, I powered it on, only to discover a message from the man dated over a year after our last interaction. "Hi," it began. "I know we haven't talked in a while, but I wanted you to know I've been diagnosed with an illness. The doctors say I don't have long. I'd really like to see you one last time. Maybe you could come by for a drink. Stay the night if it gets late. Let me know, I'll be waiting." My blood ran cold. I never responded. I didn't know if the message was genuine or just another attempt to lure me in. But I wasn't willing to find out. To this day, I wonder about his true intentions. Was he just a lonely man looking for company? Or was there something far darker lurking beneath his friendly facade? Some people wear kindness like a mask, hiding the predator beneath. And sometimes, The scariest thing is never knowing what might have happened if you hadn't seen through the lies. Story 2. The Mysterious Stalker. There's an odd comfort in routines. They make the world feel predictable, even safe. For me, walking alone at night had always been a routine. A quiet escape from the chaos of everyday life. My neighborhood was quiet, well lit, and generally considered safe. I never thought much about who else might be out there. But one night, that sense of security shattered. It started like any other evening. I had stayed late at a friend's house, talking and laughing until the hours slipped away. When I left, it was already 10 p.m. The streets dimly lit by streetlights casting long, pale beams across the sidewalks. The air was cool, almost biting, but I didn't mind. I zipped my jacket, slid my hands into my pockets, and started down the familiar path toward home. It should have been an uneventful walk, but halfway through, I realized I wasn't alone. The first time I noticed the figure, they were far behind me, a vague silhouette moving steadily under the streetlights. My initial reaction was annoyance, not fear. I valued the solitude of my nightly walks, and the presence of another person felt intrusive. I glanced back briefly, noting nothing unusual about them. Average height, dark clothes, no discernible features in the low light. But as I continued, their steady pace began to mirror mine. I turned onto another street, testing whether they were simply heading in the same direction. When I glanced back again, they were still there, maintaining the same distance. A chill ran down my spine. My mind scrambled for logical explanations. It was a public trail. People walked here all the time. Maybe it was just a coincidence. But as I turned again, this time down a smaller, less used path, they followed. The quiet crunch of their footsteps on the gravel echoed in the otherwise silent night. My pulse quickened. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. I wasn't a child anymore, and this wasn't some ghost story. It was probably nothing, but just in case, I decided to change my route entirely, heading toward the main road where I knew there would be more lights and the occasional passing car. The figure followed. I reached the main road, relieved by the soft hum of traffic in the distance. The street was wider, the streetlights brighter, but the figure didn't fall away. They stayed on the opposite side of the road now, their movements slow but deliberate. I clutched my phone, trying to think of what to do. Calling the police felt premature. They hadn't done anything. Not yet, but the way they followed me, so methodically, sent alarm bells ringing in my mind. When I reached a busier intersection, I turned sharply, hoping the sudden movement would throw him off. I walked quickly now, my heart racing as I glanced over my shoulder. They had stopped. The figure stood on the corner where I'd left them, their body framed by the orange glow of a streetlight. For a brief moment, I thought it was over, that they'd lost interest, but then they started moving again, crossing the street and heading in my direction. Panic surged through me. I reached for my phone, praying I'd get a signal, but as I swiped to unlock it, the screen flickered. No service. I cursed under my breath, my mind racing, and then an idea hit me. If I couldn't make a real call, I could fake one. I raised the phone to my ear, forcing a casual tone into my voice. "Hey, Mom," I said, loud enough for anyone nearby to hear. "Yeah, I'm on my way back now. Just walking down Oak Street. I'll be there in 5 minutes." I kept talking, describing my surroundings in unnecessary detail, dropping hints that I wasn't alone. "Oh, you're outside already? Great, I'll see you soon." The figure slowed, their movements less confident now. For the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope. But then, they stopped. I turned around, expecting to see them lingering at a safe distance. But they were gone. The emptiness was somehow worse. My heart pounded in my chest as I scanned the street, searching for any sign of movement. The silence was deafening, broken only by the faint hum of distant traffic. Had they given up? Were they hiding somewhere, waiting for me to let my guard down? Every shadow felt menacing, every flicker of light a potential threat. My mind raced with worst-case scenarios. I quickened my pace, deciding to cut through a nearby alley that would take me straight to my street. The alley was narrow, flanked by tall fences and overgrown shrubs that swayed in the breeze. Halfway through, I heard it, a soft shuffle behind me. I froze, my blood turning to ice. Slowly, I turned, my breath caught in my throat. There, at the mouth of the alley, was the figure. They didn't move, they didn't speak, they just stood there, their silhouette obscured by the shadows. I bolted. My legs burned as I sprinted toward the other end of the alley, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. When I emerged onto the street, I didn't stop. I ran all the way to my house, fumbling with my keys as I reached the front door. Once inside, I locked every bolt, pressing my back against the door as I tried to catch my breath. I stared out the window, half expecting to see them standing there, watching, but the street was empty. The next day, I learned about the abductions. My mother came into the kitchen, her face pale as she held up a newspaper. "Have you heard about this?" she asked, her voice trembling. I shook my head, and she handed me the paper. The headline was stark and chilling. Local police warn of nighttime abductions in residential areas. My stomach dropped as I read the details. The incidents were all eerily similar. Lone walkers. Late at night, followed by an unidentified figure. The victims were taken quickly. Their fates unknown. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I could have been one of them. To this day, I don't know who the figure was or what they wanted. I never saw them again. But the memory of that night haunts me. Now, I avoid walking alone at night. I carry pepper spray and make sure my phone is always charged and connected. But even with these precautions, the fear lingers. Because sometimes, the scariest thing isn't what happens, it's knowing how close you came to something much worse. Story 3. The Amputation Enthusiast. The Craigslist ad was as peculiar as it was unsettling. Help wanted. $1 for an hour's work. No experience needed. Serious inquiries only. The post, buried in the depths of the gigs section, had a strange appeal to it. It promised easy money but came with an ominous twist that stopped most people from clicking. The details, once revealed, were almost too bizarre to believe. The ad explained that the job was to assist the poster, who referred to himself only as Cash, in amputating his leg. Yes, his leg, written with a darkly humorous flair. The ad made light of what most would consider a nightmarish proposition. Don't worry, it said, I'll coach you through the whole thing. I've practiced. The contact email was equally absurd. Cash to cut off my leg at AOL.com. It was enough to make anyone believe it was a joke, yet something about the detailed description suggested otherwise. Curiosity got the better of me, with equal parts morbid fascination and disbelief. I sent a short, cautious email. Is this real? I asked, half hoping for no reply. Cash responded almost immediately, his tone polite and matter-of-fact. He assured me it wasn't a joke, reiterating that he was dead serious about removing his right leg below the knee. He explained that this was something he'd been planning for years and promised to compensate anyone willing to help with a cool $1. The idea seemed insane. No, it was insane, but I couldn't shake the urge to know more. Against my better judgment, I replied again, asking why he wanted to do such a thing. Cash's reply was long and unsettling. He shared his backstory with unnerving honesty, painting a vivid picture of a man whose life had been consumed by a singular, gruesome obsession. It all began when he was a child. He'd witnessed a neighborhood boy lose his leg in a car accident and, instead of feeling pity, he felt envy. It was like something clicked in my brain. He wrote, I didn't see a victim. I saw someone special, someone with a story no one else could match. From that moment on, Cash became fixated on the idea of amputation, not as a tragedy, but as a transformation. He recounted how, over the years, he had researched every aspect of self-amputation. His emails were littered with medical terms and references to obscure forums where others like him shared their stories. It's not a fetish, he insisted, though his explanations did little to make his fixation less disturbing. When I hesitated to reply further, Cash upped the ante. I understand if you think I'm joking. He wrote, here's some proof. Attached was a photograph of his hand, missing the pinky finger. The quality of the image was poor, but the scar where his finger should have been was unmistakable. Scrawled across his palm, in barely legible handwriting, were the words, Cash to cut off my leg. Below it, the date of the email was written. It was horrifying and fascinating all at once. Cash claimed he'd performed the amputation himself as a practice run for his ultimate goal. It wasn't as bad as I expected, he said, as though discussing a minor inconvenience. He even included details about the tools he used and how he had stopped the bleeding. Preparation is everything, he wrote, almost proudly. Then came the video. It arrived in my inbox with no subject line and no text in the body of the email. Just a single attachment. I shouldn't have opened it, I knew that much. But my curiosity overpowered my sense of self-preservation. The video showed a masked man, presumably Cash, holding a pair of bolt cutters. The act itself was quick, but the sound, the wet crunch of bone and flesh, was something I would never forget. When it was over, the camera zoomed in on his now missing finger, blood dripping onto the table beneath it. I couldn't sleep that night. I tried to rationalize what I'd seen, telling myself it was fake, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. Over the weeks that followed, Cash and I exchanged sporadic emails. His stories grew darker, detailing his involvement in a small, secretive subculture of people obsessed with self-amputation. He recounted helping others achieve their goals, sometimes acting as a spotter during their procedures. One man, he said, had submerged his leg in ice for nearly 20 hours, effectively killing the tissue to force a hospital to amputate. He was so happy afterward. Cash wrote, like he finally became who he was meant to be. Cash spoke of another incident where he provided moral support for a man amputating his genitals. I didn't do any of the cutting, he clarified, as though that made the story less grotesque. His nonchalance was chilling. These weren't just stories to him, they were milestones in a macabre journey. Despite my growing discomfort, I couldn't stop reading his emails. They were a grotesque train wreck, impossible to look away from. Each new detail pushed the boundaries of what I thought I could stomach. Yet, as horrifying as it all was, there was a part of me that was morbidly intrigued by the psychology behind it. What drove someone to such extremes? Could it ever truly satisfy them? Cash's final email arrived without warning. The subject line read, "Today's the day." It was short and to the point. I found someone willing to help. Don't try to talk me out of it. This is what I've wanted my entire life. Thank you for listening. And that was it. No follow-up. No confirmation that he had survived. Just silence. For weeks, I checked my inbox obsessively, hoping for some kind of update. Was he okay? Did the procedure go as planned? Or had his obsession finally led to tragedy? The uncertainty gnawed at me, leaving me with more questions than answers. Late at night, when the world was quiet, I couldn't help but imagine the worst. Did he bleed out on some stranger's kitchen floor? Did the tools he relied on fail him at the last moment? Or did he achieve his goal, only to realize too late the gravity of what he'd done? I'll never know what became of Cash. His emails stopped, but his stories remained, etched into my memory like scars. Even now, years later, I can't think about Craigslist without remembering him. It's a reminder of how little we know about the people we interact with online, and how dangerous that ignorance can be. The haunting silence left me with a lingering unease. But it wasn't the last time Craigslist would lead me down a path of horror. Sometimes, the danger isn't lurking in a stranger's twisted mind. Sometimes, it's waiting for you in the form of a beautiful smile and a too-good-to-be-true invitation. But as I learned next, appearances can be deceiving and deadly. I never responded to his message. I never wanted to know what might have happened if I had. But that night, as I sat in the dim glow of my bedroom, the weight of his words pressed against my chest. Had he really been sick? Was it all just another manipulation? Or was it something far worse? I'll never know. And yet, every now and then, when I'm alone at night and my phone buzzes unexpectedly, I feel that same cold dread creeping up my spine. Because some people never truly go away. Some shadows linger, just beyond the glow of streetlights. Waiting, watching. Tell me, have you ever had an encounter that left you questioning a person's true intentions? Something that, even years later, still sends a chill down your spine? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your stories. And if you enjoy these unsettling tales, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Wolf Tells for more stories that will keep you up at night. Until next time, sleep well, if you can.